Good afternoon and welcome to the Horizonte Minerals PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll, and I'd now like to play an introductory video. I'd now like to hand you over to Jeremy Martin, CEO. Good afternoon, Giselle.
Good afternoon. Good to be here today. By way of introduction, Horizonte is a pure play nickel company. We're focused in Brazil. We've got ownership of two tier one assets, the Araguaia ferronickel project, which is under construction, as you've just seen on the recent video, and the Vermelho nickel cobalt project, which is running through a feasibility study. Between these two assets, we have a resource base to build out a target of 60,000 tons of annual nickel production. Araguaia is scheduled to produce first metal next year. And between the two asset bases, we have the ability to build out a scalable, low-cost, low-carbon nickel production source. We're focused in northeastern Brazil, in the Carajás region. This is shown in the larger circle here. Carajás is home to a number of world-class deposits, predominantly operated by Vale. You can see our resource base on the southern side of the slide there. Araguaia South was the discovery that Horizonte made and consolidated with an acquisition from Teck. That's where the process plant is currently under construction. Araguaia North was acquired from Glencore, and you can see Vermelho out to the northwest, which we acquired from Vale. And it's worth highlighting the production profiles that these majors were going to develop the assets at. Vale was going to build out 46,000 tons of annual production at Vermelho. Glencore was going to develop over 30,000 tons at Araguaia North, and Araguaia South has the ability to produce around 30,000 tons of nickel. So that target that we're talking about in terms of 60,000 tons is achievable between this resource base, and there is the ability to potentially increase that to around 80,000 tons per year. The other factor is we've got very good infrastructure in place, and we'll be using the port of Vila do Conde, which is in the north of the slide. That has the ability to handle bulk and container traffic. We've got tarred highways into the project. And we've also got hydroelectric power, which is a key driver in terms of being able to deliver that low CO2 per tonne of product. The next slide shows the build out of annual capacity over time. We're currently building Araguaia Line 1, which will deliver around 15,000 tonnes of nickel. On completion of Line 1 and sign off with our lenders, the plan is to start construction on Line 2, which will take us up to just under 30,000 tons of annual nickel production. And then when Vermelho comes online, you can see that takes us over 60,000 tons of nickel. And outside of the Indonesian and Chinese producers, that will put us in the upper range of global producers in terms of annual capacity. In terms of valuation today, we're trading at around 0.4 times PNAV. Our view is as we move through completion of construction and through ramp up into full nameplate capacity, we should be trading up towards some of those peers on the left of this graph around 0.8 to 1 times NAV. And this also excludes any value built in for Vermelho going forwards. Sustainability is a key part of our business model, and in particular around Araguaia, there's some key factors which make our product and our project fairly unique in terms of what we are able to deliver. First of all, using the RKEF process, there are no tailings produced by the process. The product, which is a byproduct for the waste, is a granular inert silica slag. And that can be used in asphalt and building block material. We will recycle around 90% of our water. And from a social and economic point of view, the project is in a rural area. The average wages in those rural communities is around $5 a day. And Araguaia will generate over $700 million of taxes and direct employment. So it's going to be a multi-generational social and economic driver. And as a result of that, we've got very good community, local government and regional government support for the development of Araguaia. If we look at the economics of Araguaia, these are from our feasibility study, and we've used a price of $20,000 a tonne nickel for these economics. Today we're above that level. A key driver here is our low C1 cash cost will be sub $8,000 a tonne, which puts us in the lower quartile. Line 1 will produce around 14,500 tonnes of nickel a year, 28-year mine life, and it generates around $1 billion of NPV. And another key factor is its high grade. The first 10 years is around 1.8% nickel, and that will be one of the highest grade deposits going into production today. If we look at the last 18 to 24 months, we've achieved some significant milestones. We approved the project in early 2022. We closed out the financing in Q1 last year. We broke ground in Q2. And as we move through Q3 and Q4 last year and into the first half of this year, you can see all the key milestones that we've delivered through the construction at Araguaia. And then as we move into the second half of this year, you can see the key milestones that will be delivered as we move through to first metal early next year. If we look at the plant site and the flow sheet, what you have on the screen here is a traditional RKEF flow sheet. There are 40 of these plants operating around the world today, and they will all have a very similar configuration. The run-of-mine ore comes in at the lower part of the slide here. It goes through the primary and secondary crushers. This triangular building is the homogenization shed where we blend the ore. It's then reclaimed. It goes through the dryer where the moisture is reduced down to about 17%. And then it goes into the rotary kiln, which in our case is 110 meters long, which you'll see in the next slides. And then it moves into the electric arc furnace and the refinery. And the high-grade ferronickel product will leave site in 1-ton bags and be sold to end users. If we move to the next slide, this is what the plant site looks like today. To put it into context with scale, the plant site is about 1 kilometre by 1 kilometre in aerial extent. You can see here the ROM pad up in the top left-hand corner, primary and secondary crushers. We then go into that homogenization building. The ore is then reclaimed through the dryer, the rotary kiln, and this large area of blue steel work is the electric arc furnace. We've got the substations, offices, and then the main mine is off over to the left-hand side, which is the Picker Zero pit. Looking from a different angle here, again, you can see the overall layout of the plant site. And what's also visible here to the top left-hand corner is the Picker Zero pit, and you can see the pre-stripping that's underway there. This is the main electric arc furnace building. When it's complete, it will be 5 levels high. Right in the center is the 18-meter diameter hatch electric arc furnace. And this building will support all of the associated equipment to allow that electric furnace to operate. So transformers. Over to the left is the calcine transfer system, where the material from the rotary kiln is actually transferred into the electric arc furnace. And this area at the rear here, which is still at the civil stage, is where the refinery will be, where your final product is actually produced. We're now looking at the rotary kiln. The 4 rotary kiln columns are in the center of the slide. They're 6 meters high. These are the kiln rings that we've talked about that have been delivered to site. Here you've got 2 rings being aligned, and this cover is where the welding is taking place to actually join those rings together. They will then be lifted onto those kiln piers, aligned, and final welding will take place. Each of these kiln rings weighs between 35 and 80 tons, just to put it into scale. And then behind that building, you've got the bag houses. And then obviously on the right-hand side, you've got the electric arc furnace where the hot material from the rotary kiln is fed into the furnace. Here we're looking at the homogenization building. The roof structure is being advanced through the center. You can see the overhead conveyor where the material is actually deposited into this building. We build 2 piles. There'll be one at this end of the building and one at this end of the building. They contain approximately 9,000 tons of material, and each pile will support about 3.5 days of operation. And this is key for the flow sheet. This is where all of the material is blended to ensure that you have a uniform grade of material feeding into that electric arc furnace. We're now looking back at the main substation. This will take the incoming supply from our main power line, the 126 kilometre long power line, feed into the substation and then run out through the distribution to the site. The main power line is of sufficient capacity for both line 1 and line 2. To date, we've got around 240 of the main pylons complete, and we're at about 40 to 50 kilometers of cable installed. Here we're looking at the main Picazzero pit. We obviously were awarded our mining license, as we announced around 6 weeks ago. You can see here our contract mining contractor Fagundes pre-stripping the overburden and the limonite. And then you can start to see where we're down in the lower right-hand corner into the transition ore, and they will start stockpiling that. We're targeting having 6 months of ore stockpiled ahead of commissioning, and that is all developing well. And that Picazzero pit will extend off to the northwest, and in total size, that pit will be over 3 kilometers long. Maximum depth is about 30 meters, so shallow mining, and all free dig material. We're now looking at the water storage reservoir. Through the center of the image, we've got the cofferdam. To the left-hand side, this is the spillway. This is effectively how we cool the electric arc furnace. This water is pumped up to the furnace. It cools the furnace, and then it returns to this water cooling dam. And it effectively is a heat sink to ensure that we can maintain the operating temperature in the plant. The aim is that this cooling dam will be complete in October to allow rainwater during the wet season to start collecting in the dam. All the key packages are now ordered, either on site or in fabrication or in transit to site. Here you can see one of the main transformers for the electric arc furnace leaving the fabrication facility. At all of our suppliers and fabricators, we have our own QA QC specialists to actually check the equipment is to specification before it leaves site. And this ensures that we know as the packages arrive on site that they're at the spec, at the quality that we've ordered. This is our project schedule. You've seen this slide in earlier presentations. You can see all of the key milestones that we've completed in green along the bottom during 2022. And where we sit in mid-2023, you can see the balance of work needed to complete the site. There's the water cooling dam, there's the water pipeline, there's the main electromechanical contract, which you can see going on through site. That's the steel work, that's the piping, all of the cabling. And the aim is that we'll start cold commissioning later this year, and then we'll be moving into hot commissioning and first metal next year. If we move on to our second asset, the Vermelho project, we've talked about this before. We acquired this project from Vale. Vale had spent close to $300 million developing Vermelho. We're currently developing our own feasibility study on Vermelho. It's an extremely high-grade deposit. It's been drilled off to a high degree of confidence. Over 95% of the resource is in the measured category. It's also got a long mine life. The resource at Vermelho is sufficient to support 28 to 30 years of operation. We are currently updating a lot of the work streams that were undertaken by Vale back in 2005. We're working on all of the environmental and social permitting that will flow through into the updated permits. And we're currently evaluating what is the optimal final product to come out of Vermelho. The nature of the ore body at Vermelho allows you to go down two process routes. You can either go down the high pressure acid leach route and produce an MHP, which is a mixed hydroxide nickel and cobalt product, or it can go down the same process route that we're building out at Araguaia, which is the RKEF ferronickel with the option to deliver matte as well. So that is the current focus on determining the optimal final product. So really just to wrap up this presentation, Horizonte has 100% ownership of two tier one assets. Araguaia is moving through construction to produce first metal next year. Vermelho is moving through feasibility study stage. We also have a feasibility underway on line 2 at Araguaia to allow us to double capacity up to that 30,000 tonne a year target. And between both Vermelho and Araguaia, we've got the ability to build out that 60,000 tonnes a year of annual production. We will have a low carbon footprint with our product, which is key in the marketplace today. And we are moving into that re-rating phase in terms of our valuation as we complete construction and move to be a producing company. We have a number of key shareholders. La Mancha own 23% of the business today, Glencore, Orion, and a number of other institutions. And you can see their coverage across our key analysts that are following the story. So with that, I would like to open up to any questions.
Jeremy, thank you very much for your presentation. What I'll do is I'll just bring your camera up now. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab, which is situated on the top right corner of your screen. As you can see, we've received a number of questions throughout today's presentation, and if I could just hand over to you just to read out those questions and give responses where it is appropriate to do so, I'll pick up from you at the end.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. We've got a raft of questions here, so I will read them out and we will obviously reply to them. So first question is, are we still on track for delivery of the remaining long lead items? And the answer to that is yes, we are. Just to put a bit of context to that, obviously delivery schedules are moving around all the time. And what we do is we realign how that particular item, if there is an issue with it, sits within the overall schedule. But what I can say today is all long lead items are ordered, are either on site, en route to site, or in final fabrication. Next question is, how is the feasibility at Vermelho progressing? What are your preferred funding strategies? So as we talked to in the video, the feasibility at Vermelho is advancing. We're currently focused around looking at what is the optimal product from Vermelho. It is a high-grade, scalable ore body, and I think the other key thing there is, due to the nature of the mineralogy and the geological makeup of the deposit, we're quite unique that it can go either processing route. It can go down the high-pressure acid leach route to produce MHP, or you can go down the RKEF route that we're doing at Araguaia. So we're currently working through what is the optimal product to come from that project, and that will then flow through into the feasibility study. Next question, the original line 2 delivery was H2 23. Is this still on track? How soon after line 1 is in operation, construction of line 2 begin? So yes, we're still on track to deliver line 2, the line 2 feasibility study in H2 this year. In terms of how quickly can that be advanced, we've obviously got a number of covenants around the debt package, which are principally linked to reaching nameplate and getting sign-off from the lenders before we can then advance construction of line 2. But we're doing as much work as we can around line 2 to ensure that when we are able to make that construction decision, we can advance it as quickly as possible. And I will say there's a big drive from our major shareholders to advance line 2. Next question is, can you give a general update on Araguaia costs? And I'll hand it over to Simon.
Yeah, thanks. So as at the end of the half year, we'd spent 329 million on the project to date, and that is of a capital budget of 537. We have liquidity of 344 million remaining, which is 206 of undrawn senior debt facility, a cash position of 108 million, as well as a cost overrun facility of 30 million that remains undrawn. We did complete a further drawdown on the senior debt facility post the period end, and we're doing that periodically every 4 to 6 weeks at the moment.
Next question is how close to completion is the power line? As of the 30th of June, we had 240 of the 260 pylons complete, and we'd installed over 42 kilometres of conductors. So that is moving along as per the schedule, and will be complete within the timeline for the project. Next one I'm going to give to you, Simon.
Yeah, so Horizonte have a renewable power contract to counteract inflation in the forecast production costs. Have any other costs increased? And if so, do you have an idea of the new production costs? So yeah, we have locked in the long-term power agreement. It's US dollar denominated, no inflation, at a very competitive rate of $28 to $29 per meg, and that's for 10 years. In terms of the balance of the operating costs, another third of the figure is driven by coal, and we remain exposed to coal as it currently stands. We're currently in the market looking to hedge and lock in some lower rates, which will cement our position in the lower quartile of the cash cost curve. But we can't give guidance on what our forecast costs will be at this point in time.
Next question is, what is the difference between the 65% project completion and the 53% construction completion figure? Do you want to do that one?
Yeah, so the overall project completion includes some off-site items. So there's a lot of engineering, procurement, commissioning, also the construction of the power line and the substation where we go into the grid. So that's why it's a higher overall figure. And the 53% construction, that is specifically for construction on site.
Next question, are you investigating the idea of having a battery refinery hub in the region in between Araguaia and Vermelho? I think, look, Araguaia is obviously focused on delivering ferronickel. Vermelho has got the ability to produce class 1 or class 2. There are other nickel deposits in the region around Vermelho, and I think absolutely it would make economic sense to have a central processing hub. Who and how that is financed is obviously an open question, but there's definitely been conversations around building broader facilities to convert nickel products in the region, but it is very early stage. Next question, what can we expect from Araguaia North? So Araguaia North comes into the Araguaia mine schedule currently around year 9, year 10. So we will start to bring one of those ore bodies into the Araguaia schedule. Obviously, bringing line 2 in will mean that comes forwards in the schedule. And there's obviously potential from other deposits in the north to increase capacity, either at Araguaia South or potentially in the future at Vermelho. Next question, can Araguaia line 2 be used to supply the battery market? We've primarily focused on an identical ferronickel line to line 1 in the feasibility study, but we have done test work around producing nickel matte, and that is something that we will obviously look at going forwards. Next question is, Chinese projects, i.e. Ramu, appear to have cracked the code on successfully building and operating HPAL plants on time and on budget. With respect to Vermelho, how do you anticipate using the Chinese achievements to ensure that Vermelho does not suffer the same cost overrun? So I think, look, we've obviously looked extremely hard at the evolution of the HPAL technology. And as you say, Ramu and the 2 ramped up HPAL projects in Indonesia and the 3rd on its way, they all use the same primary design from the same engineering group out of China. We've actually worked with this group before, so clearly we will be looking at integrating that know-how into what we're doing at Araguaia. It is worth noting that there are no significant difference between the Western flow sheets and the flow sheets that are being designed in Indonesia. I think it's more the way that they're being executed, and obviously evolving that design and improving it. Question, have you been approached by OEMs for offtake? Look, obviously, as we've announced previously, the offtake on line 1 is negotiated with Glencore for the initial 10 years. We have a number of conversations and will have in terms of where future offtake goes to. I think we've got here.
Shall I take the one? So question, what is the impact of higher interest rates on the project? Obviously, we have taken out a senior debt facility of $346 million to construct the project. That is linked to the SOFR rate, so that is a variable rate with a spread upon it. So interest rates rising obviously increases the cost of capital for our project as it currently stands.
Next question, what are the latest critical path items? That's currently the rotary kiln. It is on the critical path, but it's not breaking the critical path, i.e. As it's currently structured, that allows us to meet our first metal date in March next year. So we're currently tracking all key packages are within that timeline to deliver first metal in March.
Can you comment on any impacts that the stronger BRL has had on costs? The strength of the BRL recently will affect our operating costs going forward. About a third of it is power, which we've already locked in, which is dollar driven, and there's no exposure there at all, so that is fixed. Coal is obviously dollar driven, so you're really looking at somewhere around 25% to a third of the OPEX is denominated in BRL. We will be looking at a rolling hedging program as conditions allow, out kind of 12 to 24 months to protect us on the cost basis.
There's another critical path question here. What items on the critical path keep you up at night? And similarly, what is your biggest worry in terms of delivery of the project? So I think we've discussed, obviously, the rotary kiln is currently on the critical path. I think one of the earlier questions raised a similar theme. If we have certain packages within an overall equipment piece that start to look like they're going to be delayed, obviously we're constantly looking at how we can move that around in the schedule to ensure that it doesn't break the critical path. And in some instances, we will also look for alternate supply, or we will add additional resources into, if it's a contract, etc., that needs additional support. So I think that there are lots of areas on the project that are complex, but so far we're managing them well. We're seeing good progress rates on the ground. We are running into a period of fairly intense activity as we move through Q3, Q4 into Q1. And that's where we've got multiple disciplines active in relatively confined spaces on the project, like the furnace building. We're running 2 shifts on site at the moment. But as we move into the electromechanical piping, it's about operating safe work zones and ensuring the flow of materials and people are able to work around each other, the various disciplines. I mean, we're going to be up to around 4,000 people, peak labour in November. So it's going to be a very busy site as we move through that. And obviously, we alluded to our safety statistics at the start of the presentation. It's all about operating a safe site. We've got a number of repeat questions here. I think one of the last ones we've got here.
So what is the current value of Vermelho on the balance sheet? Look, Vermelho is carried at accumulated cost to date. So it's in the $10 to $15 million of exploration expenditure at this point in time, which is the purchase price plus spend to date.
So I think that really covers all of the key questions that we have been asked. So I think that brings to the end this investor presentation.
Perfect. Jeremy, Simon, thank you very much. I think you have addressed all those questions from investors. And of course, the company will review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to the company, Jeremy, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
Yeah, I think it's obviously been an exciting journey over the last 36 months. The project is progressing well, and I think it's going to be an exciting time as we move through to completion of construction, commissioning next year. We're obviously trading, as I said, at sort of 0.4 times NAV today. And I think as we de-risk this asset, move through to production, we should start to see a re-rate in Horizonte. And I think the other catalysts around driving value, the feasibility on line 2, and then as we move into next year, the feasibility on Vermelho is going to be big value driving milestones for the business, and looking forward to keeping shareholders updated. So thank you very much.
So Jeremy, Simon, thanks once again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Horizonte Minerals PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good afternoon to you all.